Let me show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh, man, let's get this together here. Oh, layup. Oh, shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh, my goodness, I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh, my goodness, what's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Trees. I'm taking on three of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh, my goodness, behind the back. Layup. Oh, did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't got to look. It's falling. Oh, my goodness. This guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe. Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get me some of that Black Power Media again. Right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.
My bad, everybody. What's up, everybody? I can't. It's the StreamYard suite. I blame them. I can't get to all the buttons fast enough on here. Yeah, you're muted though. You're muted. But it's all right.
We'll see.
So we'll see if we get away with that.
If we get away with it.
Wait, but I didn't do it. Dang, I messed up. Hold on, wait, one more time. It's with Renee.
There we go.
It only took 3 or 4 tries on the live. There we go.
There we go. It's all good.
Yeah. All right. How you doing? What's going on?
I'm good. What's going on, man? How's life?
Life is, I mean, for me, it's good. But if I look outside my window, or if I click on any of these internets, I don't know.
It'd be a lot.
But how is it? How was it relatively for you?
You know, I had the day off yesterday and the day before. So I take all days off with glee. That's all I got. I didn't have to go to work for 2 days. So
that's a win.
It's a win.
It's a win.
It's a win. That's it.
Yeah.
It's a win.
Yeah. If that's a win. If I can get a day from not having to run around, love the babies, love that they're active, but any day without having to go here and there and all of that is a good day.
And so their season is done. Do they do a winter sport?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it never ends, and capitalisms. So it will. So there's, as soon as one league ends, there's another one that you got to sign up for.
So is it
another one
full year soccer?
It can be. I mean, you might have to piece it together, but more or less it can be, because as soon as the high school leagues end, there's the travel leagues, the club teams, and then when those leagues end, there's the indoor winter league and futsal league, and then my youngest is also doing indoor track for the winter. She just made that, so it's just never ending. And then my oldest, between ballet and right now she's doing her college application essays literally as we speak. So when we wrap this morning, I might actually have to miss warrior class today, at least live.
Yeah.
Because I have some essays to read. But
she's got a professor for a father, so at least.
Oh, it's not even that. And she got a lawyer, and she got a type A academic lawyer for a mother. I'm not a type A, whatever the other types are, B or C. So I'm not that guy, but it's mom Dukes is not messing around. So
Yeah.
I'm
essays be tricky too, man, because
I like them though. I like what they I like the questions that she's getting. I like what they're doing, and then a lot of them are shorter answer. They're like,
yeah. I mean, there's the limit. Is she doing? She's doing the Common App.
Doing the Common App, and
Okay.
then but within that apparently there are some universities have their own specific set.
Yeah. They have a secondary question.
Yeah, these supplementals or whatever, and they're short, but they're thought provoking.
Right, which is the point.
And yeah, of course. And so I think it's pretty fascinating. I think one of the ones that, what was a recent intellectual challenge that you've overcome or something like that was one of them.
Question. Okay.
Yeah. And then other ones that are more, I got to look at them again, but they're more, it's like slickly philosophical is what I keep using as a phrase in my head.
Yeah.
That you could just slough it off. And I think that's what they're looking for too. You could just say,
see if you actually answer it right. Right.
Like, what did you do yesterday? I woke up and had breakfast. What? But nah, they're looking for, something. So I see some of the question, like Alex says, he hates these questions. The questions I hate are those, the GRE questions, which I did horribly on. Like, you have 5 tigers you have to move to the second zoo, and tiger 1 can't be with 3, and 2 can only be with 1. And I was in there like, you know what, I quit.
The qualitative.
I can't. I was no good with that. So, but these essays, I love them. I love the questions being asked. I think my daughter's not.
If you don't mind the writing piece, my students will send me their essays just so I can tell them, like, this is not a good topic. So because they're not always going to get read, right? But if you end up being in that pile, that essay better be something different. Better be something different. So,
and that's what we're really trying to say, because with all the standard measurements, both of our daughters are going to be very high up.
Right.
So, but once you're in that group, these are the things they're looking for. Because
absolutely.
Because from their perspective, they're saying, we're about to drop a whole bunch of resources on you and prepare you to be a ruler of the universe.
Right.
So we can't have you, we can't have you appear.
And it's also, once you get into that pool of review, right? So there's going to be like the line that we can't tell this kid no, right? We have to tell this kid yes. And then there's the line of, this kid can't get in. We're not even looking at your stuff. So if you fall in between them 2 lines, that's a big pool, right? And so, DC Joe Black, no, I have no interest in my child going to Harvard or any Ivy League, to be honest, which is not, I mean, he's got to make the decision in the end, but I'm not, I've spent too much time working with students to know that going to Harvard, for all that they sell you on what the Ivy League experience is, you can get an equal experience at a place that is not that doesn't have that name. The differential is alumni, but every school has an alumni base that if you do the work, you can find somebody that will serve an equal purpose. It's not necessary. It's not necessary to put yourself in that position.
So we have her, she's like, we've maybe, well, she thinks we've overdone it, but she's applying from everywhere, from Harvard to Howard and everywhere in between. And the only difference that I've really been, the biggest difference, I mean, there are actually differences, I think, and the differences come at the level of resources. So it's not that you can't, I agree with you, you can get, especially at the undergraduate level, you can get what you need basically everywhere.
Right.
It appears as though it is easier to get It's just the resources and class sizes. That's the thing that has been getting me. That I'll admit that. So so Harvard is on the list. Princeton's on the list. A bunch of schools.
Yeah.
But the differences are, it's the class size and those endowments. And so when you have the theoretical potential to see that when Princeton said 6-to-1 is the ratio of students to faculty there, and they don't have a graduate school, so they have a very particular overemphasis on undergrad experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's compelling, but that's only one part of it. So, but
and
yeah,
it's tricky because, so for example, it's a school called Georgian Court in South Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
The student body is 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
It is behind a gate. You have to drive past a security guard to get on campus.
I've never even heard of this place.
Exactly. That's my point. Right? So you don't have to, and I'm not, and again, I'm not, it's Princeton.
I mean, no doubt. I mean, none of these, but where, honestly, when I look at any of these institutions, where would I feel comfortable? But sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No, you're good. But it's the same, the real issue is there are thousands of schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has been convinced that these few institutions are the ones that everybody has to get into in order to get this specialized experience.
Oh yeah,
classroom and the da. And it's the same propaganda that makes us think that cops are there to serve and protect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ivies are there for this brilliant experience that you can't get anywhere else. And it's just that most people don't have the time or inclination to search for places that actually offer a similar experience without the cost and without the pressure.
Well, that's going to be the key. And the cost, well, part of it is the cost. But I do, having worked at Morgan all these years, worked at Frostburg State, University of Maryland as a student and faculty, there is a resource gap.
Yeah.
And what students have available to them at these elite universities is different. There are differences, even in terms of look at it. I mean, at Morgan, our access to things, certain library and research engines has been cut. Our access to the Canopy platform has been cut. And yet when I visit other universities or talk to faculty at other universities, they're being inundated with more of those reasons. So there are differences. And then I'm also looking at it from the perspective of somebody who has been, again, on a 4-4 teaching load. So when I'm hearing about faculty, now I get it. That doesn't mean that they're going to turn into good teachers. But when there's a bias I'm admitting here. When I hear of faculty who are paid, 2-3 times what I am, who are teaching less than half the classes I'm teaching.
Right.
Now, I know that that's not designed to make them better classroom teachers. It's meant for them to do more research or whatever. But it does make me think that that would be I'm more I think, and maybe I'm wrong here too, but my bias at this point is I would rather my daughter have access to that classroom than the one where the faculty member has 150 students, no teaching assistants, is exhausted, is maybe, I don't know, but
you're not wrong. All I'm saying is that is not unique to Ivies.
No, that's facts. You're right.
That's
You're
all.
right.
That's that.
And that's why,
Right. And I think people get real hung up on the baby Ivies and the Ivies and the Patriots and the, all these, these schools, these lists, and they miss that there's literally thousands of other schools out there, that could be an option. So, it's tricky. It's
the one last piece
situation. It's tricky.
Yeah. The one last piece are the amount of resources available to cut the cost. And one of the paradoxes that we've learned in this last year through this process, that as a result of the Supreme Court's decision to cut affirmative action, it's the most elite universities that, I will say it this way, are doing the most to actually circumvent that covertly, more or less. In other words, they've been hosting all of these I don't know what you call them, these Ivies and elite universities been hosting all of these discussions with prospective students saying, look, I know we can't consider your race and background anymore. But we want a diverse experience, and we want a diverse, and they're at least presenting an argument of, we know what they said, we know what we can't do officially, but we want diverse, we want first generation, we want this, we want that, and we have a bucket of money. We haven't really an endless faucet of money to make this happen. Right. So we'll see. I mean, obviously,
I'm interested to see what admissions, and obviously this is like my job. So on top, it's something I need to understand anyway, but understanding what this does to the numbers for next year, like what their incoming class actually ends up looking like, because they can say a whole lot of things, and then we'll see how that translates when it's time for them to send out letters of acceptance.
I will say it. I know we got to move on, but now I've shared my bias. Outside of American University, I think where my oldest, she really ultimately does want to go to Spelman or Howard. She is in sort of my experience, my own Not a Different World project reality, and a lot of it is she wants to be around Black people. And she wants to be around, like, with the glimpses she's seen where she's visited my campus. She's like, this is the vibe. This is what, and I'm thinking, along with her mother, of practicality and opportunity, so we'll see.
Right. And those are two interesting.
Yeah. So look, yeah.
I got into Howard when I they didn't give me no money, so that was a no. But
so that's part of it too. We got to see. So
that was
who's
a
gonna
no.
come with the money?
And Lord forgive me, I did not like Spelman when we went to visit. It was not for me. It was not
really.
Nope.
So she's been getting inundated with the exact opposite. My brother's down there. A lot of people that she's met, and a lot of it does feel like a lot of the women that we meet who have been there have positive things to say. So and then here comes Renee. No, just playing.
Always, I know, but I'm. Yeah.
Is there something specifically that you can point
to? I am not really I was not. I mean, I went through my bougie chick phase, but I am not a bougie chick, and it is a Jack and Jill bougie chick. Yeah. So as long as you don't mind that, because I know plenty of people who went. One of my closest friends in high school went to Spelman, and she loved it, right? And so, but it's definitely one of them places where if you don't fit in with that crew, that Jack and Jill crew, it might not be.
Yeah. Again, part of that's part of my point that. And we've actually talked about Jack and Jill because there was a group out here and they were inviting and I was laughing. I was like, wait till we get
how much money? You see how much money that stuff they want you to put in and the cotillion?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But
thousands.
We never got that far.
Thousands. Yeah.
They just announced it at one of the. They had one of the school awards for Black Kids Achievement Awards or whatever, and one of the people there announced, "Hey, I'm in Jack and Jill." Yipper's asking, what is Jack and Jill? Yeah. So good for you, Yipper. That's how working class and real you are. You don't even know who these women are. Salute to Yipper.
Yeah.
You want to take a quick... Yeah.
So Jack and Jill it's how do you put it? It's supposed to be like a organization for service and community and that type of thing. But I mean, you have to pay into it. You have to pay to maintain your status in it. You have to, they do things for community. They do events and they do fundraiser stuff. I mean, they do that stuff, yes, but I mean,
it's the black bourgeoisie, it's the black elite,
black bougie.
and
Yeah,
it's
it
often
really
historically at least been associated with that, the whole colorism thing. It's got a lot of,
yeah.
So salute to you that you don't know.
Yeah.
And when they made that announcement, I started laughing, and they were like, "What are you laughing at?" I was like, "Wait till we get to the car." I was like, "Let's just get to the car." Like, no, this is. They were like, I was like, "Nah, this is not." Nah. So yeah, but part of my point is about the Not a Different World project is that my argument there is that a lot of what attracts students to HBCUs is the allure of the black excellence, the beauty, the black experience. It's not centered on academics, intellect, or certainly radical or even critical politics. It's that is what is the allure. So that's what's and it's in my own household. She's looking for a vibe, and I get it, especially coming out of this suburban community. Like, I get it. Nothing made me want a black experience more than growing up around a bunch of white folks. It was like, I got it. So and even my daughter, like, her experience is way more black and African diaspora than what I grew up with, and she's even like, I want an extension of that. I don't want that to end. So, but to your point, I keep saying, but you can get these beautiful pockets of blackness anywhere. You don't need an HBCU. You don't need an Ivy League. You don't need, they're everywhere. And when you find, when you get there, you'll find them. It's like,
and sometimes at the HBCU, that is not the black experience you're looking for, right? Like, you're looking for, especially I can imagine in your house, she is looking for an experience where she's going to feel energized and around people who are revolutionaries, and
she wants some of the bougie too.
She wants some of the bougie. She might be all right then. She might be better. She might be better off at a PWI that has a nice body of black people though.
So ultimately, what I said was, what I've always said is, make us make a decision. Make us have options.
Yeah.
If you have options, you're more likely to get what you want. If you don't, then you get what you get.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been our part of our inducement. The one thing she's not going for that I used to always hold out, that I kind of wanted, my bougie thing was, I wanted her to go to Juilliard. And I just saw this jazz drummer instructor from Juilliard on another thing, and I was like, dang, I had that was my little, but I didn't, I don't impose that on it. It wasn't her thing. So I was like, you don't want to go to Juilliard? You don't want to even try to get in that joint? You multi-talented. You pretty talented. She's like, it's New York. You said you want to be in New York. But anyway, I know, my bad. We've warmed them up enough. I think we stretched. We've done our stretch for the morning. Make sure everybody's ready for Warrior class at 1:00. But you've of course got another loaded run sheet, a lot to get to. How would you like us to proceed?
Well, why don't we start, since you text me at 8:00 in the morning? Why don't I did add it to the run sheet though. It was on my list of things to do this morning. So it's on the run sheet along with another article about violence in a prison. So why don't we take a look? Let's take a look.
I saw this. It was like, son. So ex-officer Derek Chauvin, convicted in George Floyd's killing, was stabbed in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And I excised all of the strikeable comments I might have made. Like, before we went live, I let out like all the things I would have wanted to say that would get us an immediate YouTube strike. So I'm good. I feel safe to engage this story at this point.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you engage
but-
it because I didn't do that part.
Well, I mean, it's just, so as it says here, Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer convicted in murdering George Floyd, was stabbed by another inmate and seriously injured Friday at a federal prison in Arizona. A person familiar with the matter told the Associated Press. The attack happened at the Federal Correction Institution in Tucson, a medium security prison that has been plagued by security lapses and staffing shortages. So when I read that at first, I thought, when I first read this, I thought medium security. He's in a medium security prison.
He is in a medium security prison.
But when I read the immediate rest of the sentence, I said, maybe, again, I'll just leave it. I was like, maybe, the person was not authorized to publicly discuss the details of the attack and spoke to the AP on the condition of anonymity. The Bureau of Prisons confirmed that an incarcerated person was assaulted at FCI Tucson at around 12:30 p.m. local time Friday. In a statement, the agency said responding employees contained the incident and performed life-saving measures before the inmate who it did not name was taken to a hospital for further treatment and evaluation. No employees were injured, and the FBI was notified. The Bureau of Prisons said visiting the facility, which has about 380 inmates, has been suspended. Right. Chauvin's stabbing is the second high-profile attack on a federal prisoner in the last 5 months. In July, disgraced sports doctor Larry Nassar was stabbed by a fellow inmate. In November, an inmate at the facility, a low-security prison camp, pulled out a gun and attempted to shoot a visitor in the head. Wow. That's you got to be careful. That's messed up. So that's as far as I really got with it. I just was trying to manage my response to that for these YouTube streets.
So what I find interesting is that suddenly the Department of Corrections is clear on how to rush someone out of the prison in order to get medical services and treatment, because that is not always the case, as we know. And that's why I shared the second story that's on that row.
My bad.
No, it's all good. Because this is a story that is not getting, and is not likely to get, very much attention. This gentleman was in Alabama. He had a 12-month sentence, and I believe it was 2 weeks before he was due to get out, he was taken from his cell and apparently held hostage in another part of the prison where he was repeatedly assaulted.
Oh my God.
And then he was after days, moved to a hospital, to a facility where he was brain dead, and he eventually passed. And the family was told that he died from a drug overdose. And that is obviously not the case, as when they got to the hospital, he had been clearly assaulted. And that they were well aware that this was happening. And this is a facility where there is a lot of issues going on with the warden. But it's just, as someone who is watching how these different stories develop, that AP News is so like, oh my goodness, look at what happened to Derek Chauvin. But here's this story. And
so this kid was only supposed to be in there for 12 months. What was he in there for initially?
I'll be honest, I don't know the full history of his story. He was a drug addict, which, as everyone knows, that could be the end result of anything. if he got 12 months,
Yeah, I mean,
it couldn't have been any, I don't want to say couldn't have been anything too serious, but it wouldn't have been anything.
dang,
Yeah,
that was a
that's an
lot.
awful one. So someone asked if we could drop that link from EJI
This
into
that
the chat, if you
yeah
could drop it in there,
yeah yeah yeah.
so they can see it. But it was just,
But
that story is
warning,
just wild.
just heads up on that
That is,
warning.
there's a, yeah, go into reading that story, being fully aware that they are detailed about what happened while he was being held prisoner in the jail. So just know that it is not a pleasant story by any means.
Man, it's the night.
Hey Rob, there you go. You jumping on my sheets. So also under there is another story out of
Mm-hmm.
Mississippi. Turns out there's not just one family whose loved one was buried unmarked grave in Mississippi and found out months after the fact. So there's now another family has come forward in Jackson, Mississippi to find out that their loved one was also buried in an unmarked grave in a pauper's grave by the
Wait, where
police.
is this?
It might be the last row. Nope, lies. Mario Moore.
Oh, there it is, man. Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah. Wow.
That wasn't on there this morning. That's why you didn't see it. That this is not your fault.
It's all good. It's all good.
So Mario Moore was buried on the same day
Wow.
in Jackson, Mississippi. And the only reason the family found out is because the police department released a list of 24 people who had been killed.
Wow.
And the family found his name on the list. He was bludgeoned to death and just buried. And they claimed that they made an attempt to find the family, and they couldn't get in touch with anybody.
Bludgeoned
Now,
to death, wrapped in a tarp, and
in a
left on the
tarp.
street.
Mm-hmm. But it's the same story. He was buried with his ID, and they claimed they couldn't get in touch with the family. Now he had been, dealing with his own issues, and the family at first, when no one heard from him, because he had been known to kind of just disappear for days and weeks, they didn't really think too much about it. And apparently it was when he did not come home for a holiday dinner that they realized something might be wrong. But they did not know what the story was until they saw his name on that list. But there's definitely some wildness happening in Mississippi if they keep finding all these bodies, people looking for their families and can't find them until whatever thing that happens that causes them to realize that, like, they've been buried by the system and the family was not notified. So this all boils down to my same issue of trying to really figure out ways to inform people that the system is not what they think it is. It does not serve the purpose they think it does. It does not do the things that they're told it's done. It does via the news and TV and movies and so forth. And so, yeah.
And it just seems like it's the same. It's got all the hallmarks of that, the tenuousness in his story.
Mm-hmm.
Poor working class background in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like it said some low level charges for larceny or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and struggled with drugs, and was an itinerant. Was the
Yes.
word the article used, which I think is actually, I think it's a pretty fair way of describing the situation, and just somebody moving around, not likely well housed or in good shape all the time, but not at all a threat is the way I
Right.
get the report. Like, and that's the easiest targets.
Right.
Uh,
Right. And then he was
and
buried on the same day in the same cemetery. I just, there's something not right about this situation. And I don't live in Mississippi. And so I don't think I've ever even stepped foot in Mississippi now that I think about it. I think that's one of the states I've never actually gone to. But there's, there's just all this stuff happening, and there are very few conversations about all of these random deaths, people found hanging from trees in Florida, and there's no conversations happening surrounding all these things. And it was worth saying, it was worth mentioning and bringing up so that people can take the time to really start looking about what's happening, what your police department is involved in your city, and what stories are coming out, because it's always, it's local. It's local. And if it's hard. People are busy and they trying to pay bills and eat and make sure they have somewhere to sleep at night. But it takes nothing to become one of the families in these stories, is what I think is the pertinent thing that people understand.
That's the point,
right?
I was trying to get. Yeah, that's
right.
When I was saying tenuousness. It's
right.
so close. It's just it
right.
feels so close that everybody
right.
comes to this. Yeah.
Right. So it's something.
Yeah, I don't mess
Yes,
with the
Piper.
South
All
like that
politics
either.
is local. That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
It is correct.
Yeah. I don't. I've driven through the South a couple times, and it's spooky to me. It's just spooky.
Yeah. That's one way to put it. All right, so we can move to Maryland, because
up south.
So we got, well, it's also not just Maryland. So I ended up, there was a number of things happening that I was coming across with regard to censorship, with the story of what's happening in Palestine, and the propaganda that's being told regarding what Israel is actually doing. So the first story is the one we talked about real quick with the Nation. So let me back up. Was it Harvard Law Review or Princeton Law Review? Harvard, right? Harvard Law Review was on the edge of releasing its very first piece written by a Palestinian, about genocide in Gaza, and they pulled it. I guess it was at the very last minute they pulled it, right? They were just about to publish.
Yep.
And there was a meeting.
Gone through all the editing. Yep.
Gone through the whole process, and there was a meeting, and there was a debate, and Harvard Law Review.
No Palestinians.
That included no Palestinians, correct? And Harvard Law Review decided to pull the piece. So the Nation released the piece, which I thought actually was pretty, at least someone.
Yeah, I'm always quick to be hating on the Nation, but I gotta give them props on this one. I was like, I gotta give them a shout out for this one. This was a good look. I wonder though. The one thought I had was, and I was like, but I'm not going to do it. Is just the pettiness. What would an actual analysis of the Nation's coverage of this issue? What would it reveal? Right. And would it reveal that their publication of this is in line with their general approach,
right,
or is it a departure in this new moment of? But nonetheless, I got to give them credit for that.
Yeah,
they get their little.
So since you do the highlight, which I always appreciate, and you always manage to catch the things that I catch. I'm going to turn it over so you can.
Oh, I mean, okay, cool. What I as you said, you laid it out quite well. What I have here is just that what they were told was that rather the discussion revolved around, in other words, they were saying it was not denied publication because of some technical issue, or it would have been the first piece written by a Palestinian. It went through several rounds of edits before it was set to be published. The discussion did not involve any substantive or technical aspects of your piece. Rather, the discussion revolved around concerns about editors who might oppose or be offended by the piece, as well as concerns that the piece might provoke a reaction from members of the public who might in turn harass, dox, or otherwise attempt to intimidate our editors, staff, and HLR leadership. What stood out to me in that is that they are admitting, which I think is disastrous for them. They are saying, this is not about your argument. It is not about the quality of your writing or the arrangement of the argument or the array of resources or citations, or it is not about the intellectualism or the scholarliness of it all. It is strictly about the politics of some members, none of whom include Palestinians, feeling a certain kind of way, being offended. I don't know what the hell that means in light of what the article is making a great case for. Palestinians are suffering genocide, so why you would be concerned? Why should anybody be concerned about you being offended? Okay, right. And then they say and then this whole line about our members might be harassed. So again, they're saying it's not that you're wrong. In fact, it may be that you're right. Right. That we're not going to because we don't want the backlash. We just don't want to. Which is I just think is an important admission to your point about highlighting what is not the way the world is not what many people think it might be. I think this is a beautiful admission on their part that, look, this is all about politics and this is not about academia, scholarliness, intellectual rigor, honesty. This is just, we don't mess with the argument, so we're not going to publish it. And I'm like, on some level, that's whack as hell, of course, but I appreciate it. Speak on it. Say more.
Right. And that they went into, I mean, the audacity to be like, it's not because you're Palestinian and it's not because of your argument, but like, isn't that the whole point of your law review, is to present the arguments that are made because, it's supposed to be the top law school of the land? Like, what is happening right now?
And then just in case, just for the sake of time, I'll just simply say the point of the article. It's a very well written and seems to me, obviously I'm not an expert in international law, but it makes it seems to have a very well written and strong argument for what many of us already think is the case, that this is genocide.
Right.
That what's happening there is genocide. So they use, in fact, again, something that I have used in talking about Black America and the intervention of the state in the cultural production, specifically of hip hop, but that the UN Genocide Convention defines the crime of genocide as certain acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. Yep. So if you continue reading what the UN Genocide Convention says on that, it specifically talks about slow death measures. It talks about in the context of distorting a people's culture and denying access to adequate housing, healthcare, and education. All of the things that easily, I think, apply just even to Black people here would certainly apply to a group of people who not only, in addition to those things, are literally being bombed out of existence, with people explicitly saying, we want to bomb them out of existence. These are dogs and savages. So the idea that anyone could read this very well argued, sourced, cited, about just the blockade is genocide, according to some experts. Right. I mean, all of this to the colonial condition. So what they're just saying is, as the author says here, Palestinians just can't be innocent.
Right.
So that's really what Harvard is agreeing with. They're agreeing with the author here. No, y'all, you can't be innocent. So we can't publish this, because if we publish this, you look innocent.
Right.
So I'll
right. But and I want to move into what's happening in Maryland also. So, but this is all part of, I think, what we really need to take in and start to understand about how this system works, right? About how they silence people who are even using all of the information that the system has provided, right? Like there's nothing from that article that is not based on the already existing premises of what genocide is, right? He didn't make up a definition. He's using the definition that the system created. And even that is being silenced. And it's interesting really to watch this kind of play out. And I'm curious to see how this, if it even has any future ramifications at all. Ricky made the comment that she thinks this was more about the nation pointing out the pulling of the article versus actually looking at the genocide or the, you know, the situation itself, which I don't disagree with. That's probably a fair and accurate assessment of.
Wait, I'm sorry, because I missed the comment. I can't even. I'm for some reason I can't even find it. So you're saying that? I'm sorry. Say that again. That Ricky's point was that.
So Ricky's
that the
point
nation
is that
yeah,
right. The nation's not trying to like really highlight the genocide in Palestine. They don't really. That's not really their purpose, right? Their purpose is to call out Harvard Law for pulling this article right before it was supposed to go forward. So, you know, it's more about, you know, the act of pulling the article much than it is about what the article is actually pointing out. So, and, you know, I'm inclined to agree with Ricky on that.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying I wonder if a content analysis of the nation was performed regarding their coverage of this issue, what would it look like? What would it reveal as it relates to their decision to support this letter? So I think you and Ricky make a good point there.
Right.
That would be what, yeah.
So moving on to more. So also in Maryland happening, and if you can, I'm trying to decide which one you should look at first. So the one next to the one that you have highlighted, the Maryland Matters article, is about the removal of someone from the hate. Well, she was suspended from the hate crimes task force.
Leader of the Maryland chapter of CARE temporarily suspended from hate crime task force for social media posts on Israel-Hamas war.
Right. So just put a pin in the fact that this came out. Yeah. This came out on November 21st. Hold that in your head. So the article is basically speaking about how Zainab Chaudhry was removed from her position because anti-Semitism, and, you know, because she was posting on social media about Palestine and genocide and calling things what they are. And so, you know, as always, it was called anti-Semitism. And now she has been suspended from her post on the hate crimes commission or whatever.
But the article doesn't say what she said, and I didn't follow up on it. So like, what is it that they're saying she said though?
It's all social media. She was, and I, you know what, I should have added the link because I do have the Twitter that she posted. She basically was just saying this is genocide, and you know, I mean, I don't think it was anything separate from what anyone else was saying who was speaking the truth about what was happening in Palestine. The interesting thing is, if you go to the other article now, which is, and I don't know anything about this outlet, but the second article was shared with me.
The Baltimore Fishbowl. I don't know anything about this either, and I didn't get a chance to fully get into this article. But But anyway, Big Fish, right. Baltimore Jewish Council's
you see the date on this, right?
November 15th.
And you recall the date on the other one that I told you to put a pin in,
November
right?
21st.
In this article, the person they interviewed discusses the social media of Zainab Chaudhry.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh. But I just loved, I didn't get too far in it, but I just loved the initial framing, the first line. These are trying times for Baltimore's active and growing Jewish community. Baltimore's Jews grapple with how to show care for the Palestinian people while defending the state of Israel against historic threats.
Right.
So already out the gate, I'm like, oh my God, this is about to
Right.
be brutal. But
It's
now, okay, so
brutal.
let me see.
And I wish I had.
Hold on a second. Let me just. How do you spell her name? Sorry.
It's nice. He doesn't name her.
He doesn't name her.
He says,
Ew.
how can someone who's heading the anti-task force promote anti-Semitism on their social media? So it's something to that. There it is.
I don't know how you repair that relationship. I don't know how you can ask someone who says anti-Semitic things on social media to then serve on something like an Attorney General's hate crimes task force. Wow. But again, what is she saying that's anti-Semitic? What are they saying? How is he defining anti-Semitism?
Right. And that's the issue, right?
Because remember, Renee, it said he's struggling to be with Palestinians.
Right. And he also in here says that the Palestinians are dying because of Hamas.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So it's an interesting. I don't know what the task force does, Ricky. And I'm not at all suggesting that the task force is useful in any way, shape, or form. I just the whole how this whole thing kind of played out.
They're dying as a result of Hamas. Wow, God.
Right. So and then I'll quickly shout out. So underneath this, there is a link to someone who is contemplating running for governor in Maryland. And so he actually is the person who shared the second article with me. But Andy Ellis he's a Green Party person, and he's in debate. He thinks he's gonna run, but his statement on Palestine and Maryland and how the current governor is responding to these things is it's well done. I had to send him a note like, Andy, this was very, very well done, and I wanted to make sure that I shouted him out for sending me that.
Did your conversation with Andy include him coming around here to discuss his governor, whatchamacallit?
So I think he's just made this decision. I think this is new that he's decided to do. He's been toying with it because he's got some ideas about co-ops for the sports teams in Baltimore. He's got some interesting ideas, honestly, and he drove up from Baltimore to Jersey to attend my screening on reimagining safety. So I met him in person, and we had a very brief but good conversation, and I think, I think it's worth pointing him out to you as someone who lives in Maryland, and then people in Maryland can make their own decision about whether or not this is something they want to have any engagement with. But I personally like Andy. I think
so if we vote for him, we immediately. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You think he what?
I just think he was. I think he was worth giving this shout out to and letting people in Maryland have their own opportunity to kind of look him up and see what he was about.
Immediately, we would get someone who supports BDS if we vote for him, as opposed to Wes. Wes.
Right.
All right. I feel like if I ever met Andy, I feel like did I ever meet Andy?
I feel like he knows who you are, and you may not know who he is.
I know his name. I'm just trying to remember if we've met, but either way, at least all right. That's who else would I vote for? And yeah, I guess I don't. As far as I'm aware, there's a one candidate race for governor.
Right. Right. So, and there's time. It's 2023. Like, who knows how this will all play out by the time 2026 rolls around. But, there you go. So we'll see.
Yes, he's better than you are a capitalist, Andy. He's already, Andy Ellis is already better than Andy Young. Yes. With all due respect to our nationalisms.
There you go. Tahani's not waiting, is she?
No.
Okay. So I'm struggling here because I don't know if we're going to have enough time.
We can always start and come back to something, or we can.
All right. So there's a couple of things left, and so I'm struggling as always. So PSL sent that email out. They're doing that stream at 1:00 today, and I forwarded you the email.
Wait, what stream? Oh, did you?
Remember you? Well, no,
I don't remember.
I know you don't. You Lord. So you thought the stream was yesterday and that we were going to watch it yesterday, but it actually is today at 1:00, which is a conflict.
Oh, right.
But I was very much interested in how they presented their message about the stream, and that they provided links to political education in their email. That it was such a different presentation as far as what you normally get from a political group. And I was very much like, this is how you get people to engage. Like, this is the way to do these things. This is how this should be done. Yes, given God is Claudia and Karina. So they're doing a stream today at 1:00.
So I think I'm sharing this here, right? So this is what you're talking about. So today at 1:00 Eastern, they're doing a live stream on YouTube. And then to your point, they have, the PSL, man. I mean, this is what I'm saying. Like, as I keep saying, and somewhat jokingly, even when it worked against me personally, their organizational approach is I think something that a lot of folks could learn something from. It's formidable. So I'm not surprised that it would be presented like this. With all these resources.
Really, to actually send out resources for political education as you're trying to engage with people. Although Alex just said that he sent out a note to join and he's still waiting to hear back. So I don't, I can't, I'm not in PSL.
Oh, wait, it's not sharing. I'm over here scrolling through and it's not been sharing because I'm having a problem sharing my screen. Okay. So I thought you were all seeing what I was looking at. My bad. Yeah, I don't know. Something has happened again with me in StreamYard, and I can't share certain. And it
was an email, so there was no.
Yeah, it's not in a browser. That's the problem I'm having.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's the PSL channel on YouTube. I think.
Yeah, it is on. So I'll just go there. I'll click that link and. Let's see, what do they have here? If I can find the specific one, I don't know. But yeah, it links to their page, but their page doesn't. I don't see let's see, like an upcoming. But I'm assuming it's 1:00 today. I just don't see like an upcoming. Here it is. My bad, everybody. Here it is. Watch this. There we go. There it is. And then I will drop the link in the chat if folks want to go straight to this stream. They can check it out.
There you go.
At 1:00 or come back later, maybe after Warrior Class and watch it not live, or go back and watch Warrior Class not live if you have to watch that live. So
I just, I went back, I finally had a minute and I went back and I listened to Kalanchi's conversation with Dhoruba about that national coalition. And, so the ongoing debate that I've always had regarding social media and the internet and all these things is
and just Renee, sorry to cut you off, but Tahani has just arrived.
And
so we can
go. So let me
pause right there, tease that, hold that. Okay.
So everyone, I'm very, very excited. Last week we shared clips from a WBAI show about Palestine and the West Bank. And one of the people who participated in that conversation was Tahani Mustafa. Tahani is the senior Palestine analyst at the International Crisis Group, where she works on issues including security, socio-political, and legal governance in the West Bank. She holds a PhD in politics and international studies from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. She is based between the UK, Jordan, and Palestine, and I'm very, very excited that Tahani was able to join us today. So welcome.
Welcome,
Tahani.
and check
Thank
this out.
you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Fantastic.
I'm thrilled that you were able to come on with us, Tahani. Thank you so much for the time and all of your work. After I listened to that WBAI piece, I actually took some time to go through the site for the crisis group and what you all present, and there's so much information on there. Do you want to talk to us first about, like, in general, kind of what the crisis group does and what you do, and how we got to this place, how you got to this place, actually?
Thank you. So Crisis Group is in the business of conflict de-escalation. So we, a lot of our recommendations, a lot of our analysis is based on having their analysts based in the field, on the ground. We speak to everybody, all stakeholders from the top down, and we try and come up with pragmatic, workable solutions to different conflict areas. I work on the Palestine file. I've been working on the issue of Palestine for the last 11 years and joined Crisis Group nearing now 3 years. And in that time, we've been working on things like the issue of succession, the need for Palestinian renewal. At that time, we also had the unity intifada, the cross-border conflict with Israel. And there was obviously, there was a lot of internal movement within the Palestinian body politic that we were still trying to get to grips with. And at that time, we were also seeing signs of Hamas wanting to revert back to being a resistance movement. So it no longer wanted that administrative control over Gaza. It had realized with time that its administration over Gaza was a complete failure. In that time, it's been marginalized from international and regional politics. Ultimately, conciliatory politics that the PA was pursuing wasn't bringing Palestinians closer to statehood. So there was a lot of discussion, internal discussion within Hamas. Fatah itself, the governing party, was also starting to fragment. It's been slowly imploding, having very similar discussions within it. What is the best approach now to take, given the ever-changing realities on the ground that has no longer made a two-state viable any longer. And within that time, we started to see a shift within younger generations of Palestinians who are moving towards supporting and even to some degree engaging in armed resistance. Many of them had also had very similar opinions about conciliatory politics. They no longer felt like Israel was a good faith partner to be working with. They didn't feel like Israel was really a partner to be engaging in a peace process with, because when their leaders did go into any sort of I wouldn't say negotiations, but when they did enter talks with the Israelis, they were offered meager economic concessions. But any kind of political promises were then, completely revoked the very next day. We saw that with the Aqaba summit back in February, where Israel had promised to halt settlement expansion. It had promised to try to clamp down on what at that time was becoming, or what we were seeing was an acceleration of settler violence. The very next day, you had senior Israeli officials come out and say that what happens in Jordan stays in Jordan, that they made no such promises. We also saw a pogrom, what Israeli human rights organizations were describing as a pogrom on the Palestinian town of Hawara. A group of settlers had gone in and basically attacked Palestinian residents that were there. They burnt homes, properties. It was absolutely awful, but obviously nothing compared to what we're seeing today, which is daily pogroms at this point in time since the 7th of October. And at that time, I remember sitting, I was in Nablus. This was back in March, and I was sitting speaking to some of the members of the Lion's Den, a new armed group that had propped up, composed of young Palestinians between the ages of 18 to 30. And we were trying to gauge what their rationale was. What was it that led to the rise of this new phenomenon? Especially as the PA in Israel were claiming that this was the biggest threat to their security since the Second Intifada. And we were starting to see a lot of international, especially US investment in the coercive capacity of the PA. And these Palestinians, these young Palestinian boys, despite what a lot of international observers were claiming, despite what the media was even claiming, that they were desperate and frustrated and economically deprived and, irrational, they were actually, very, very articulate, well-educated. A lot of them didn't come from the poorest segments of their communities, but they had a very, very clear political understanding of what their reality was. And many of them felt stuck. They felt that there was no positive political horizon. Now, fast forward to the 7th of October, and that is a very similar sentiment that we saw come out from Gaza. Hamas had reached a point of desperation. They no longer wanted to engage in this cyclic process whereby you have a continued blockade of the Gaza Strip. Israel offers meager concessions, which it uses as a carrot and stick to pressure Palestinian leaders when it wants to. Palestinians get frustrated. They fire a few rockets over the border. Sometimes it ends up leading into a cross-border skirmish. But ultimately, things don't change. Things don't shift. And so that is pretty much how we've ended up here today. It's the complete failure of not only a peace process that has, that was almost a failure to begin with because it never actually acknowledged. There was no acknowledgement of Palestinian sovereignty or national rights. What was offered was Palestinian autonomy. And over time, we have seen that. We have seen that transpire. We've seen Palestinians lose more land, lose more rights. They've become fragmented, not only geographically, but also amongst themselves. And they've now hit a point of desperation, almost nihilistic resistance, if you like.
I'm just sorry, Renee. Go ahead. I'm just wondering. I don't know much about the crisis group that you work with, but I'm just wondering, in the context of all, and I don't even know if you're able to answer this, but in all that the crisis group deals with globally, where does what's happening now with Palestine stack up, so to speak? Where does it rank among the crisis group's set of crises, both in terms of what's happening now and then historically? And then I know this is a difficult question to follow up with or for any of us to answer, but then what is it that the world should be doing, or does the crisis group encourage that the world do?
Well, so again, prior to the 7th of October, we were trying to warn policymakers that the situation was completely unsustainable and something was going to implode. We didn't know what, we didn't know how, but this was a warning. We were pretty much trying to reiterate through a lot of our outputs. If you go back and look at a lot of the statements we were putting out, a lot of the reports we were putting out, we were trying to warn that, ultimately the status quo is no longer sustainable. There needs to be a change of policy. The two-state is no longer viable. It has become nothing more but a talking point. That there needs to be serious policy shifts towards Palestinians. Palestinians want political renewal. They are pushing for political renewal. There is no longer a legitimate leadership that Palestinians feel can effectively advocate them on the political stage, which is pushing many towards drastic armed resistance and violence. There is an incredibly violent Israeli occupation, made even worse now with the extreme right-wing government. And all of this just almost fell on deaf ears, unfortunately. And part of that was because of the lack of a better policy from the international community. It wasn't that they didn't acknowledge that a lot of what we were saying was fact. It wasn't that it didn't acknowledge the fact that the two-state was pretty much dead. It was just the fact that they couldn't come up with better policies at that point. And it wasn't for a lack of technical solutions either. It was because no one had the political will to do what was required, which was to put pressure on Israel. Israel knows that it can behave with complete impunity. It has been proven that time and time again, and we're seeing that even today. We don't want to talk about the issue of Gaza for now, but if we just look at the West Bank as a good example of that, the West Bank had nothing to do with the 7th of October, and yet you're seeing 3.2 million people subject to some of the worst collective punishment since the Second Intifada. Since the 7th of October, you've seen just over 230 Palestinians killed, just from Israeli search and arrest operations. Israel has been conducting a mass arrest campaign where they have managed to arrest Just from the 7th of October alone, 3,100 Palestinians. Those Palestinians are being tried in military courts. They are being put in administrative and security detention. We're seeing an uptick in settler violence. Again, prior to the 7th of October, the UN was reporting that this is probably the worst year we've seen for settler violence, where we were seeing something like 3 serious cases a day. And by serious cases, they meant physical assault. That's never mind the kind of psychological, verbal abuse that Palestinians face on a daily basis from settlers. That number has now increased by 7 attacks a day. You're talking about 7 physical attacks a day. So far, since the 7th of October, we've had 8 Palestinians killed just by settlers alone. We've seen movement restrictions between different towns, villages, cities.
I'm sorry, that's just in the West Bank. I just want to.
Just in the West Bank. Since the world's attention has been diverted to Gaza, this is what Israel has now managed to do in the West Bank. Since the 7th of October, they shut down all exits and entry points into the West Bank towns, cities, and villages. In some cases, in Area C, which is 60% of the West Bank, which is under full Israeli control, we saw the National Security Minister, Ben-Gvir, who had given additional arms to settlers who are already armed, something like 14,000 weapons, and they have used that to form militia groups, or what they call security squads. And they are using that to man the exit and entry points of Palestinian towns and villages, which means anyone trying to leave or enter are subject to attacks. Not only that, we've also seen a limitation in terms of Palestinians being able to access their farmlands, which means that, fresh produce, food, access to basic services, that's all been very much limited. In some cases, it's turning into a serious humanitarian crisis in some areas, including East Jerusalem. Palestinians have been forbidden from praying. Young Palestinians below the age of 60 have been forbidden from praying in the Al-Aqsa Mosque since the 7th of October, on Friday, their holiest day. And that was also one of the reasons Hamas gave for its attack on the 7th of October, was the lack of freedom of worship. And what we have seen from the international community so far have been words of condemnation, but no action.
Thank you. So part of what made me reach out to you is exactly what you said, because there had been this clever focus only on Gaza and only on October 7th. And in doing so, and in completely ignoring what was happening in the West Bank, which, in that interview, you said the numbers of Hamas, the relation of Hamas within the West Bank was so small that could not be the excuse for what was happening in the West Bank. And so in focusing only on Gaza and Hamas, it allowed Israel to continue what they were doing in the West Bank, which they could not blame on Hamas, but because no one was talking about it, right, it continued to happen. And now you have this entire situation that has nothing to do with the quote unquote terrorism, right? But you're still destroying the property, just killing the people, the genocide, all the things that were happening in the West Bank, and no one was talking about it. And I feel like, in my opinion, that was the proof to me that this really had nothing to do with quote unquote terrorism. It had nothing to do with the fear of Israeli lives. It was really about the land grab and the genocide and the removal of the Palestinian people from their ancestral lands. So I really it was so important to me to have someone who was an expert, who could really speak to what was happening. Outside of that, you mentioned the non-viability of the two-state, which I'm in complete agreement with. But can you explain a little more for the audience, like why this two-state solution, which now all of a sudden they're bringing back as a conversation piece, right? Now we're going back to, we'll have a two-state solution. And no one understands that the two-state solution is done. There is no two-state solution. That cannot be possible. But can you explain a little more about why that's no longer a viable option?
Sure. So I just want to go back to a point you made, and thank you for also just bringing that to my attention as well. I think it's also just worth pointing out that in this time as well, you've had 15 Palestinian communities also displaced in the West Bank just from settler violence and the violence on their properties and also persons. We've had Part of that has also been the fact that international observers and human rights groups are not able to get to the ground at the moment, because those that do try are also being subject to attacks. And in many cases, even the Palestinian Authority, who has tried to go onto the ground to document what's happening, have been subject to attacks. I think Haaretz put out a very good piece from an Israeli human rights organization that actually documents the torture that those two PA officials who tried to go to Hebron to document some of the violence and one of the communities being displaced had been subject to when they were kidnapped, robbed, and then subject to about 14 hours of torture, one of which was almost sodomized. And you're talking about members of the Palestinian Authority. These weren't even just residents of the communities that were being displaced. So, it is incredibly, questionable when Israel claims that it's trying to dislodge Hamas and an entity like Hamas from governing Gaza, when you see what it's actually doing in the West Bank as well. And the kind of crisis that it's now inflicting, and the front that it's now opening up in the West Bank. And it's also just worth considering, like, as you said, Hamas is not in the West Bank. Palestinian Islamic Jihad, their numbers don't really total more than 4,000 in the West Bank out of a population of 3.2 million. A lot of those that are being driven into armed resistance are actually from the Fatah group, who have lost a lot of faith in their own top tier of their leadership. So they're turning to more radical elements like Hamas and Islamic Jihad that are willing to equip them, provide them with the logistics in order to push back against an incredibly violent occupation that, as I mentioned earlier, has shown them that maybe conciliation just isn't the right path to go down when you have that sort of partner for peace, quote unquote partner for peace. Which then brings us to the two-state solution. Now, I mean, a lot of Palestinian historians, and I think even Israeli historians who have been critical of the two-state track, have kind of reiterated this probably better than I can. But ultimately, the peace process itself failed. It failed a long time ago. It failed from the outset. And that is primarily because when Israel speaks of Palestinian statehood, it doesn't speak of it in the sense of sovereignty. It speaks of it in the sense of autonomy, which means that Palestinians will have limited ability to provide administrative services to themselves, but total control of the land remains with Israel, which is why Palestinians had rejected what was offered at Oslo prior to that in Madrid and DC. Now, Arafat had decided to enter direct negotiations with Rabin at the time, and that's how we ended up having the implementation of the Oslo Accords, which set up the Palestinian Authority and then obviously the different land designations for the West Bank, where 60% remained under full Israeli control, 18% remained under full Palestinian Authority control, but with the exception whereby Israel reserves for itself the right to what it calls hot pursuit, which means that at any time, without needing to provide any kind of evidence, it is able to conduct incursions, arrests, targeted assassinations if it feels like its security is under threat. And then the remainder of the West Bank, Area B, is shared between Israel and the PA. The PA provides administrative services like medical, education, and sanitation, and then Israel retains full security control over Area B as well. So that was essentially the offer that Palestinians were afforded. Now, I say afforded because it wasn't really a peace process, especially when you talk about the asymmetries of power here, where one side speaks and dictates the peace terms. That becomes a dictation of surrender ultimately. It's not really a process. And that facade or that mirage really started to fall apart in the first 5 years, and that's how you ended up having the second intifada. Palestinians started to realize what it ultimately was. And many had already, figured out what it was from the outset, which is why there was a lot of opposition to it, but they went along with it on the promise that it was meant to be an interim arrangement. It didn't turn to fruition like that. And that's how you ended up having the second intifada. Since then, the international community have continued along that track. So when they talk of a two-state solution, it is within the parameters of the Oslo Accords, which is what I've just detailed out for you. In that time, you've also had the expansion of Israeli settlements. Now, Oslo didn't do anything to stop Israeli expansionism or settlement building. It didn't do anything to guarantee the rights of Palestinian refugees. It didn't do anything to guarantee a contiguous Palestinian territory. Palestinians were not afforded full control of their own land, air, and sea space, either in the West Bank or in Gaza. It did not give them control over their own resources like water, and now we've just discovered that there are now gas fields in Gaza. It did not give them full control over their own economy, through the Paris Protocols, the Palestinian economy is very strongly tied to the Israeli economy, which means they even use Israeli currency if you go to the occupied territories. Again, in terms of security, Palestinians were not allowed to, or were not permitted to have any kind of militarized state. So it would be a completely demilitarized state, which means that the best they could hope for was a policing force. But even then, the logistics of that would be dictated by Israel. So at the moment today, when you talk about the Palestinian Authority security forces, you're talking about a policing squad who has probably, they're allowed to carry things like pistols, for example. Even vehicles, they're not allowed to have proper armored vehicles. When you talk about bulletproof vests, they're not allowed to have vests that are impenetrable to Israeli bullets. Which makes it kind of humorous when Israel claims the PA isn't doing enough to stop militants in the West Bank when they're using looted guns from Israel. And then that's the best you're really equipping them with. And by the international community's own admission, what the Palestinians ask for, in terms of what they can give them is ultimately up to what Israel will allow, right? So everything goes through the Israelis, everything, anything that goes in and out, anything that is given to the Palestinian Authority has to go through Israel. It needs to be pre-approved by Israel. And that was pretty much the arrangement that Oslo has set out. And that has very much, stayed intact. At the same time, you've had triple the number of settlers that you had since the outset. So since the 90s until today, you started off with 150,000 settlers in the West Bank. Today, there are now 750,000 settlers in the West Bank. And so, again, when you talk about the two-state solution, how are you going to undo? I mean, first of all, what are you going to do with all those settlers? Right? They're not going to go willingly. Also, those settlements don't build themselves. Settlers are given very good financial incentivization from their own government. They don't have to pay for anything. They're actually quite literally paid to go live in these plots of land that are given to them. They are given free housing, land, resources. So how are you going to undo that? How are you going to make these different little patches of territory into one contiguous territory? Since the Oslo Accord, since the mid-90s until today, the West Bank and Gaza have been completely cut off from each other. If you are a Palestinian from Gaza, regardless of whether you have a Palestinian passport or not, and this was prior to Hamas's takeover, you still needed a special permit in order to go visit the West Bank, right? And this was prior to 2006. So again, when we talk about the two-state solution, like I said, it's a talking point. When the international community talks about it, they're basically saying we're going to take things back to the status quo, right? We're going to bring everything back to things being quiet, Palestinians, having an administrative body to keep them quiet. Israel can retain its full control through a very sophisticated lexicon of security for Israel's security. Palestinians, again, will need to prove that they are able to behave well enough in order to guarantee their own statehood, because that is basically the premise of Oslo, which is it was first and foremost intended to guarantee Israeli security before final status negotiations could then go ahead. And like I said, the final status negotiations on offer are precisely the parameters I've laid out, which is why it's been completely unacceptable for many Palestinians. So when Palestinians talk about a two-state solution today, those that do favor a two-state solution do not favor it within the parameters of Oslo. And their concern is not so much a two-state or one state. Their concern is, even if they were to live under a one state with Israel, what can guarantee that their rights will be respected? Or are we in a de facto situation whereby we're practically in a one state, but under a system of apartheid? And then, there are those that are concerned with what that means for their national rights, if that does become the permanent status quo.
I think you said it there. That's what it means, apartheid. Renee and I talked a little bit earlier about the recent controversy around the Harvard Law Review censoring an article pointing to the genocide that's occurring. And we've covered here recently Greenblatt and the ADL promoting their a public relations crisis, that Zionists in Israel has a public relations crisis, that the world, particularly young people, are not following the traditional message. And yet we still are where we are. So I'm wondering how you and maybe some of your colleagues are assessing the propaganda wing of this struggle, Israel's crisis and concern, what seems to be Well, let me ask you: how do you all see it? How do you or do you and your colleagues see the ongoing propaganda battle?
I think this war has been somewhat different in terms of the way that it's been incredibly polarizing for many, and not to say that this subject hasn't been polarizing for the last 75 years, but I think there's something about this war, what happened on the 7th of October, and the subsequent framing of Palestinian resistance and an organization like Hamas, which has made it even more polarizing than usual. And I would be lying if I said that even us as ICG didn't have those internal schisms between us, in terms of what was the appropriate language to use from the outset. What was the kind of outrage? What was the messaging we should have been putting out? What were we meant to be advocating here? And I think, that there has obviously been, but this isn't something that started on the 7th of October. This has obviously been something that has been ongoing for quite a while. But that conflation between any criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. But this time round, I think it has been incredibly difficult to really put out any positive messaging towards the Palestinians without being conflated as a Hamas appeaser or as an anti-Semite. And I think many spaces now have become very, very hostile, whether you're talking about universities, think tanks, media. Things are starting to change a little bit, but the shift just hasn't been enough. And so for many of us who are trying to historicize, contextualize, it has been an incredibly hostile space. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. And that is still something that many of us in this space are still trying to figure out amongst ourselves in order to get that messaging across without being struck down as, a terrorist sympathizer or an anti-Semite, right? It was absolutely ludicrous. I mean, never mind the accusations and the appropriation of terms that have been around for so long, like when Palestinians call from the river to the sea. That was a response to the Israeli right wing's call from the river to the sea, which would call for a full Jewish ethno-national state from the river to the sea. Palestinians, on the other hand, that was a response to that call, where when they appropriated that from the Israeli right wing, their call was for Palestinians to have equal rights, like everyone else, from the from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And yet somehow that discourse has been flipped on Palestinians as though we were the ones advocating for an ethno-national state, which was never the case. To have things like your national symbols, like the kufiyya, for example, conflated with a swastika, which was absolutely outrageous. To have groups like Hamas being conflated with ISIS and the Taliban, claiming that Palestinians need to be liberated from these people. Gaza, just as a good example of that, Gaza has some of the most well-educated women. Israel actually killed the young girl that scored the highest in her high school exams. She was killed by Israel in an airstrike, right? If anyone who has been to Gaza, anyone who has been to the occupied territories, can very much easily testify that, Hamas is not ISIS. Hamas is not the Taliban. Women work. Women are educated. There may be some cultural conservatism that may be not necessarily ideal, but what Palestinians currently need liberating from is not Hamas. It's from an incredibly violent Israeli occupation that gives relevance to groups like Hamas, right? The West Bank is not Hamas, but as I described, the reality there doesn't sound that significantly different from the misery that people experience in Gaza. If Gaza is the world's biggest open-air prison and the West Bank is the world's biggest closed-door prison, right? Palestinians have an authority that is secular in the West Bank. You can wear short dresses, you can date, you can drink, whatever. That doesn't mean their lives are any better. That doesn't mean that they have different demands to those in Gaza. Just to conflate an organization like Hamas wasn't calling for this conflict to transcend the borders of Palestine. At their core, they are a resistance movement. The lack of acknowledgement, which is incredibly infuriating. Yes, their 1988 charter was extremely outrageous and problematic, but bear in mind, it was written by a group of fundamentalists who were born and raised in refugee camps. They had grown up in two different wars, 48 and 67, where their families and their relatives were displaced by an incredibly violent process and had to grow up in refugee camps. Now, that's not a justification, but that context is important to know where that charter came from. And then not to mention that, okay, again, like I said, their charter was incredibly problematic in 1988, but clearly Hamas had proved to be pragmatic enough for the international community to allow them to partake in those elections in 2006. And then when they won and Israel and Fatah didn't like the results, they preempted a coup. But in any case, in 2017, they did renounce that charter. They reformulated their charter, where they recognized the difference between Judaism and Zionism, where they made it very clear that they would accept a state based on a two-state solution, the 1967 borders, where they made it clear that, okay, they don't recognize Israel's right to exist, which neither does Israel, by the way, but they do recognize that Israel is a reality that's not going to shift. So it's just something we now have to work with. There is a reality that they have to work with, even if that means accepting a Palestinian state within the 1967 borders. They have tried conciliation before. Israel has torpedoed two of those. The most prominent example was in 2012, where they killed their lead negotiator. And then that's what led to the 2014 war. You've had numerous cases where Israel has broken every single ceasefire. They have a history of breaking ceasefires with Hamas. Even today, this current humanitarian pause, within the first hour of that humanitarian pause, they were already shooting at Palestinians trying to move from the south into the center and north to try and see if there was anything left of their homes. At the same thing, and they're still they're doing that still now. When you had the hostage exchange and release, they were still conducting mass arrest campaigns in the West Bank. So while they may have released something like a handful of Palestinians, they had still arrested something like over 90 Palestinians yesterday. No one had really questioned what those Palestinians were doing at administrative detention to begin with. No one had even questioned what administrative detention is, which means you are arrested without charge or trial, and you are left there indefinitely. And that could be from anything between 6 months to years. No one had actually questioned what the conditions would be, or whether there was any guarantee that those Palestinians won't be rearrested, which has happened before when you've had an exchange, whether they'll be rearrested once Israel gets all those hostages back. Israeli hostages were allowed to celebrate their release. There were things waiting for them, like doctors and toys and families. Palestinians prisoners, their families were warned that anyone who celebrates would be subject to a $19,000 fine, and their family member would be rearrested. They were prevented from congregating outside the prisons, waiting for family members. They had tear gas fired at them. And at the same time, if you look at the 300 on the list that are meant to be exchanged, something like 260 of those are children. You're talking about Palestinians under the age of 18. It's absolute madness, the way that...
I'm sorry. Just quickly, you said something a minute ago about Hamas coming, obviously, to recognize. You said something. I'm not clear what you were saying. You said Hamas recognized Israel, but does not recognize Israel, but Israel does not either. Did I hear you correctly? I'm sorry. Could you?
No. So Hamas doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist, but it does recognize that Israel exists. Okay. And so it is now a reality that they need to simply work with.
Okay, sorry. I thought I heard something else. Okay, thank you for that. Right on. Sorry, Renee, go ahead.
No, it's fine. And and there's a couple of questions in the chat, and I know we're limited on time, and I don't want to hold you too long. But you used the word secular, which caught my eye because someone in the chat has been asking if you can speak to the use of that word with regard to the one-state solution. And does the word secular make a particular distinction within that conversation?
So when Palestinians talk about one state, they're not talking about a religious or ethno-nationalist state. They're just talking about a state where everyone, including Israelis, which means that they do acknowledge now that Israel is, again, a reality that isn't going to shift, right? So it's a simple recognition that Palestinians want to live within an Israeli state, but that they want to live with equal rights and freedoms, just like every other Israeli, which at the moment you do not have. You have a class system of citizenship, where Palestinians rank below Mizrahi Jews, which, Mizrahi Jews are Middle Eastern Jews, and then you have Ashkenazi Jews who are European Jews. And even there, you have a citizen-based ethnic kind of system whereby Mizrahi Jews, again, are afforded less opportunities than those of Ashkenazi origin. And then obviously Palestinians rank well below all three categories, where they're not afforded similar rights or access to state services, where they can have at any moment their citizenship easily revoked, where they live in squalid conditions, where their communities, their neighborhoods are not afforded similar state services or even similar state investment. It is a serious system of effective apartheid. And so when Palestinians call to live in a one state, they want to live in a one state where where everyone is granted equal and fair rights. And you don't have this kind of citizenship system citizenship-based system. Now, for some Palestinians, their concern, for those that oppose the idea of a one state, it's based on two premises. The first is they're concerned what that ultimately means for their national rights. And there are some that feel like Israel won't behave in good faith and may actually end up being able to repress them easily in a one-state system as they can in a two-state system, right? Where they won't be afforded fair, equal rights as other Israeli citizens. And so you could effectively just have this apartheid system become an entrenched reality for all Palestinians. And then there are others that worry about, they worry about what that means for their national rights, but there's also a history of dispossession, of living under oppression, where many of them don't necessarily want to become Israeli citizens. They don't want to live with Israel. There is a history of trauma there that makes them, very reluctant to want to live amongst Israelis, and they'd rather have that separation, which is why when we talk about apartheid, it's not the most effective operative term when we talk about liberation for Palestinians, precisely because of that division. For those that live within Israel, that does describe their reality to a T. But for those that live in the occupied territories, apartheid is just one mechanism of a broader process of settler colonialism. And there are those that would rather have that separation rather than live in a one state. And so for them, the battle becomes defeating or dismantling, the entire settler colonial system rather than just one element of it, which is apartheid.
Thank you. And if I could just ask one last question, and then I know we have to let you go. Sorry, Jared, I don't know if you also had one last question.
Many. We'll have to. Yeah.
Now that I have your contact, you'll hear from me again, and we can have more conversation. There's and part of what I like to discuss here is really the entire premise of imperialism and the empire, and how we're all fighting the same battle. And one of the questions that has been happening in the chat is, what are you aware, if anything, if there are conversations between some of the allied forces, maybe in Africa or other places that are not aligned with Israel? And is there any work being done, with conversations between the Palestinian leadership or voices, or anyone who is trying to have these conversations with those African nations, with those other allied states, with other people in the UN who don't ally with the US and the UK? Are you familiar or aware of any of that happening?
Yeah, so never mind the Palestinian leadership. I think at this point, the Palestinian leadership have been so horribly co-opted to the extent where they no longer think in terms of national interest. They're very, very self-interested. And that is, that has been part of this disconnect between their constituency base and the top tier of the leadership, is that they cannot no longer relate to the reality on the ground any longer, which is why Palestinians don't feel like they have advocates any longer. They don't, if we look at today, what we're seeing unfold in Gaza is one of the biggest humanitarian disasters of our time. People have described it, even genocide scholars scholars of genocide have described what's happening today as a genocide. And yet, where has the PLO or the Palestinian leadership been? They've been very much silent, completely marginalized. They've been very much focused on their short-term survival. Where they have allowed rallies, they've had to be pro-regime rallies, just like you're seeing across the Arab world. In some cases, they've managed to arrest people that have tried to kind of push back against Israeli security forces. They did that quite a lot during the first few weeks of the war. until Israel then started doing it themselves, basically, which is where we saw an uptick in mass arrest campaigns. So Palestinians don't feel like they have a leadership. So right now, a lot of those efforts are coming from the grassroots. And, unfortunately, it is not a united grassroots. Palestinians are more fragmented today than they ever have been. So there are a lot of efforts, but they are very fragmented. But they certainly are looking towards now the global south. The Western international community have proven themselves to no longer be impartial brokers, if you ever could call them that. But it's become so starkly obvious at this point that their faith in if we talk about trying to guarantee Palestinian rights, it's not going to lie with the international community. That is not something that they will push or advocate for. But yeah, there are now movements being built that are looking towards the global south, like Africa, Latin America, allies in Southeast Asia. And that process is starting to slowly build itself up. I wish I could talk more about it, but I'm not really involved in those kind of activist circles. That's not really what ICG does, but they are definitely there. And whether those circles can start, whether those circles or those allies have enough leverage within the international system in order to really make some kind of serious operational impact on the reality of Palestinians is something that we'll, maybe hopefully see, but it's still very early to determine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. It was great virtually meeting you and having you come through. And please answer Renee's emails ASAP and come back again.
I will do it. Thank you so much.
No, sir,
thank you, Tahani. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, peace.
Take care.
Right.
Bye.
Well done. Well done. That was dope.
Whew. That was a lot. Rich, I disagree. She actually literally said Africa. She did. She said Africa. But she said the word Africa. She did. Roll back the tape.
I'm not.
It's fine. But she's also very clear that that is all on the ground and happening, in ground roots. So I'm fine with her answer. I feel like that was very insightful. That was exactly what I was hoping she was going to bring to the conversation. So, and I'm excited because we still have like 10 minutes. And that video that I sent. So the line that's shockingly is about the voting. It's kind of about the voting, but it's not really about the voting. So
talking about non-voters?
No.
No,
Under
voting.
voting.
Okay, right.
Right. So NBC News released
the YouTube.
Article. Right. But there's also a YouTube video. So
all right.
Since we're short on time. So why don't we just go to the timestamps for the video, because this conversation was fascinating to listen to, and I
didn't get a chance to hear it, so this will be new. This will be brand new for me. Unfortunately, I did not. I'm not. All right, but okay. So I got the first section pulled up here. So you ready to go, or do you want to say anything about it?
All right. So I'll just quickly say. So this conversation is about how Palestinians and Muslims around the world can utilize this moment, right? There was some, I listened to the whole conversation. It's actually I would highly recommend that people listen to this entire video if they have the time to do so. But this part specifically, the clips that I shared with you, I feel like these are conversations that we should be having amongst ourselves as we discuss these things, like the after party, like PSL, like third party, all these things. This is fascinating. So go ahead and play the first clip, and then
there is a big difference between the capabilities of the Muslims here and in the US, and I'll say what I mean. In the US, because of the electoral system and the electoral college, it means that 1% Muslim population can decide the difference in Michigan between the Democrats and the Republicans. And when you look at the polls in the US now, Biden is behind in 6 states, 4 of them swing states, 3 of them where Muslims are the deciding vote. That's why Kamala Harris came out, the vice president of the US, and said we're introducing a counter-Islamophobia program in order to try to appease the Muslims, because we are concerned that they might punish us in Michigan, because the Muslims, there is a Twitter account, there's a sister called Hind Makki, she made a very good point on Twitter where she said, based in the US, she said that we survived 4 years of Trump, but 10,000 Palestinians did not survive 4 years of Biden. So we can survive the worst case scenario, but we will not allow Biden to continue as is. And now we're seeing a campaign start in the US to convince the Muslims to say, look, yes, Trump might be bad, but we have to demand the respect of Biden, we have to punish Biden. And there might be a third scenario that might rescue them, where the Democrats get so concerned that they decide to change the candidate. Instead of Biden, let's put another Democrat, at which point the Muslims might be able to legitimately go and vote Democrat and keep Trump out. The point is that because of the Electoral College system, Muslims do have the ability to really punish the Democrats. And I think that's why there was an interesting email that got sent out by the Democrats 4 days ago, where they said Trump wants to bring back the Muslim ban. We stand against it as Democrats, because they're concerned that the Muslim vote might actually punish them.
You can just play the next one, and then we can.
Yes, I'd be very interested to see the extent of Muslim power in their ability to produce independent candidates. I would be very interested to see in Birmingham, Manchester and London, areas where Muslims are particularly concentrated. I would be interested to see the extent of their abilities to be able to really upend a traditional status quo in areas where Muslims have the power to do so. By that, what I mean is, let's say, for example, Muslims in Ilford, for example, decided to put up a Muslim candidate, or to put up an independent candidate, any candidate, it doesn't have to be Muslim. And they decided to go and vote for that independent candidate. As a political analyst, I'd be fascinated to see the numbers that independent candidate can achieve. Why? Because as the Chinese strategists used to say, know yourself, know your enemy, know you win all battles. At this moment, I feel the Muslim community, and you might disagree with me, I feel we're not aware of the extent of our power. We're not aware of where we're at the moment. We have Muslim representatives, yes. We have some Muslim businesses, yes. But we've never really deployed that power in a concerted, organized way where we can say, okay, today in 2023, we are at this stage in terms of our power, and therefore to reinforce it, we need to do this, this, and that. I'd be interested to see in the next elections that take place here in the UK, less of a focus on punishing Labour and Conservatives, but coming together as a Muslim community, and including those sympathizers who are non-Muslims, who are livid at the Labour and Conservative support for genocide and ethnic cleansing, so that when we meet, inshallah, and I hope that you have me on again, when we meet, inshallah, next year, and we have the numbers of what happened, we can look at those numbers and we will either say, okay, this is the extent of our power. We were 1,000 votes short in Ilford, for example, but that's huge. That means that viably, we can topple Labour at the next election, get an independent MP. He doesn't have to be opposed to Labour. He can work with them in the parliament, but we can show that we can force our voice on that. I think that at this particular stage, as with any army that goes to battle, I think we need to determine the strength of the army that we have at the moment. What is it that we can realistically achieve? I think.
And then go ahead and play the 1 minute one, and then we can. I want us to talk before we go to the next clip.
So the very next one is.
It's 1 hour and 26 seconds.
Okay. Oh, the very last one.
Don't go to the 106 yet, because that's like a different topic. But
wait, 1 hour and wait a minute. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. 1 hour and 26 seconds.
Yeah.
On conclusion.
So let's give it a shot. Yeah. It's one of those that, listen, at the end of the day, we've reconciled the worst case scenario in which a party, the leader that supported genocide and ethnic cleansing, is going to come into power.
And let's also be frank, they're going to be better than the Tories.
They will be better than the Tories.
Apart from on this issue, it's pretty much the same, but they'll be better than the Tories.
But it's a good chance for us, I think, as Muslim communities, in areas where we can make a difference, for the Muslim communities to come together and say, you know what? Labour are going to win anyway. But if hypothetically, if we all decided to go for an independent candidate,
let's see what happens.
How many votes could we get behind the independent? And for somebody as a political analyst, and I want to word this properly, like I love my job, like I enjoy, analyzing politics and the like. I would be so excited and eager to see the extent of the power of the Muslim vote through their ability to organize, to put independent candidates, even if the independent candidate loses. If an MP gets 20,000 votes and that independent gets 18,000 votes, as a political analyst, that means that the next election you can topple that MP because you only need 3,000 votes to topple that MP. If in Ilford, West Streeting gets, for example, I mentioned Ilford because there was a protest in front of West Streetings. Yeah. If in Ilford, West Streeting gets 20,000 votes and the independent candidate, through the mobilization of the local community, Muslims and non-Muslims to punish the Labour Party, managed to topple West Streeting, who's touted to one day even become the leader of the Labour Party. If they get 19,000 votes and West Streeting gets 20,000 votes, at that point, Ibrahim, you'll agree with me that we will say, okay, 19,000 votes, that means 1,000 didn't have enough hope, but now that they've seen 19,000, next election they will vote.
And not only that, but West Streeting will actually fall in line.
The Labour will receive the message. One of the things that's worth interesting, and I think
because this is the thing that frustrates me, because I feel like people say, "Oh no, brother, look, we're going to let the Tories in." The reality is that if you're not going to physically, you're not going to actually show that you're willing to go the other direction and do it successfully, they won't take you seriously.
Not only that, imagine the reaction of the Muslim MPs in Labour who took 3 weeks to come out to call for a ceasefire, or Sadiq Khan 3 weeks. When they see that the Muslim community is now mobilizing behind independent candidates to test their power, because they will hear the message that the Muslim communities are not mobilizing to actually topple Labour because they don't believe they can. They are mobilizing to test their power because now they're seriously contemplating how to manifest that power in a way that benefits their interests. Suddenly you will find that they will have a debate between themselves as to the extent to which they can continue to defy their local communities in favor of towing that party line. You send a message. And I think that...
Okay. So the face you're making is exact. That was what I was going for, right? That's literally what I was going for, because I found this to be such an interesting conversation, not just about, because it's not just about we're gonna end it, we're gonna fix it, we're gonna get all these people. It is about doing an actual analysis, right? Let's run it and let's see if we can actually identify where our political power lies. If we can identify by the numbers what kind of effect we can have as a bloc. And I was like, okay.
Again, I gotta watch that whole thing.
Yes.
But so where I get stuck is, so yes, if we're going to deal with electoral politics, that this is along the lines of how I would want us to be doing it. I would like there to be the added piece of an acknowledgement, as I feel about it, that part of the value in this is demonstrating the viability of organized effort, period.
You got to watch it because they discussed that.
Okay. So
it has to be a local organized effort.
What I mean is that what I mean by that is that I'm not simply advocating that the vote be the extent of the organization or the focal point of, or the end goal of organization or anything like that. Only my interest is that, because regardless of what so much of the public discussion is and criticism is, many of us in a variety of ways engage some form of electoral politics, whether only locally, whether only independent, whether only national, whatever, or voting for the lesser of evil, or voting for the never to be elected, whatever it is, but we don't do it with this level of forethought.
Right.
So I'd like, if we're going to do it at all, let's organize it, let's radicalize it, let's connect it to other efforts in other political education and other forms of thinking about why we're doing this. But yeah, I
thought it was worth, and he says, and this is part of what they discussed, was that at the point where they are, they have nothing to lose. right? They're not going to get anything out of this process that is actually going to.
And I love that point.
In line. But he also says that it's an opportunity to empirically measure the extent of our power and influence. And I said to myself, well, damn.
Well, damn.
Well, damn. So we have a minute. Can we play the last one that starts 106, just because it's like a minute and a half, I think, or whatever.
106.50.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So I do like the point that 50 that we survived Trump and we're not surviving Biden. I'm like, all right, here we go.
I think that I think one of the things is, and I'll talk this in two strands. The first thing is, I think it's important to note that having Muslim representation, even if they are flawed within parliament and the like, is beneficial insofar as it reflects a trajectory that shows a greater opening up of opportunities for Muslims. Even if they are not perfect, it's clear the trajectory is going that way. And the way I measure it is, look at how the far right react to the presence of Muslim MPs. You can see that they're concerned about the trajectory. So I think Muslims should always put it in this framework. I think that when it comes to standing against a Muslim MP, if that Muslim MP was too scared to call for a ceasefire, that Muslim MP is not worthy to represent us. So therefore, we need to hold that MP to account by backing that independent candidate and actually going, because it will force that Muslim MP, if he wins, because he represents the Labour Party, if he wins, he will know that they tried to mount a challenge in his hometown to topple him. The conclusion of that MP will not be to hell with the Muslim vote. The conclusion will be, go to the Labour Party and say, guys, I backed you, but really, I'm under fire here. You need to give me something to help to appease them. Even in that scenario, we benefit, we gain in it. So I think when people are saying, no, we don't want to go against the Muslim MP, to be honest, when push came to shove and we needed them, they weren't there. Let's bring the independent MP, let's push it forward. The best thing that can happen is we deliver somebody who will represent our interests. And if he fails,
some of them were
the
there.
others.
Yeah, some of them were there.
You got to watch it.
As you put here, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
You said Muslim faces in high places. I mean, that's, yeah, we got to be putting them there. We can't let folks select for us who are our representatives.
It's always the conundrum. And I know we're right at it. We went a little over.
So I don't want to get in trouble. Yeah, let's get out of here. Peace to you, because I know you're willing to fight for it. Thanks to you, Renee. Thanks to Sister Tahani. Thanks to everybody in the chat. To those who will see this later, peace to you as well. Only if you're willing to fight for it. Thanks for coming out for oh my God, it's not doing it. With Renee.
Peace, people.
Peace, everybody.